My name is Mia Claire, and I never imagined standing outside my mother's 60th birthday party, clutching a carefully wrapped gift, while my father told me I wasn't on the list. I was 34 years old, successful in ways my family didn't seem to value, but in that moment, I felt like the shy, overlooked girl I'd been for most of my life. Mom and I used to be close. At least that's what I believed, until the icy disapproval in my father's eyes made me question everything. "You're not on the list," he said, as if I were some stranger trying to crash a party. Behind him, my older sister Grace gave a small, satisfied smile, one she didn't bother to hide. I watched the party swirl behind the glass doors, laughter clinking glasses, the warm glow of candles, and string lights. I recognized aunts and uncles, neighbors from my childhood street, all invited to this milestone event. Everyone except me. Let me back up. I was the middle child squeezed between Grace, the academic golden child, who never disappointed, and my younger brother Noah, the family's charmer, who never had to try. Our family photos told the story. Grace center stage with trophies, Noah perched on Mom's lap, and me half out of frame. But Mom always had a way of making me feel seen. When I was 7, I came home in tears after not being invited to my classmate Lily's birthday party. Dad brushed it off, saying, "Not everyone gets invited to everything." But Mom sat with me, making silly paper crowns, turning our kitchen into a kingdom just for us. "You're special in your own way, Mia," she whispered as we giggled together. I clung to those words through the years. Like when I got 3rd place in the 7th grade science fair, not first like Grace always managed, but Mom hung my certificate on her dresser mirror. "It's not about being the best," she said, "it's about doing your best." Dad took it down days later, claiming it cluttered the house, but Mom tucked it into her jewelry box. Proof that she was proud of me. My 16th birthday was the worst. My friends ditched me for a more popular girls' party. Mom drove us to the city, took me to see the musical I'd been dreaming of. We had dinner at a fancy restaurant, just the two of us. "Sometimes quality matters more than quantity," she said, holding my hand across the table. Those were the anchors I clung to when I left for college. Unlike Grace, who went to Northwestern to stay close to home, I chose Boston University. I needed distance, even if I didn't fully understand why back then. Dad was furious. "What's so wrong with Chicago?" he snapped. "Are we not good enough for you?" The physical distance became an emotional one. I poured myself into my studies and later into my career. While Grace followed Dad into the family insurance business, and Noah drifted from job to job, I found my place in the bustling world of tech. At 34, I was director of operations at Luminous Technologies, a job that demanded everything from me and gave me a sense of purpose I'd never felt in my family. But my success created a quiet rift. Holidays felt like walking through a minefield. Dad would ask, so still at that computer place, even though I'd sent gift baskets with Luminous's logo every year. "When are you going to settle down and give your mother some grandchildren?" he'd say, as if that was the only metric of success. Grace's resentment was more overt. 2 Thanksgivings ago, she cornered me in the kitchen, her voice dripping with contempt. "You think you're so special with your Boston apartment and fancy job," she sneered. "You have no idea what it's like dealing with Mom and Dad every day while you're off living your glamorous life. I call every week," I defended myself. "I invite you all to visit." "Everything's a performance with you, Mia," she spat. "Always has been." The bitterness in her voice stunned me. I'd spent my entire childhood watching her win trophy after trophy while I clapped from the sidelines. I never thought she saw me as competition. "That's not fair," I whispered, though I doubted she heard it. "I've worked hard for what I have, and we haven't." She cut me off. "You think you're better than us because you left. But Mom doesn't even understand what you do. At least I'm here being a real daughter." Those words left a scar. After that Thanksgiving, Mom's weekly calls became monthly, then stopped altogether. When we did speak, she sounded distracted, distant. The woman who once made me feel special with homemade crowns now forgot the details of my life I was sure she used to treasure. Noah, always more of a follower than a leader, took his cues from Grace. Our once silly, affectionate text exchanges dwindled to one-word replies. The last time I saw him, he spent the whole visit glued to his phone, barely acknowledging me. Dad, who had never championed me anyway, became even more dismissive. Your mother worries, he'd say in the rare conversations we had. All alone in that city, working too much. That's not how a woman your age should live. I tried to explain that I wasn't alone, that I had friends, colleagues, a vibrant life I'd built from the ground up. But in their eyes, success without their definition of family was failure wrapped in a corner office. The final straw came last Thanksgiving when Grace jabbed at me again about my empty life. At least I built it myself, I said, my voice shaking as I set down my fork. I didn't just slide into Dad's company and call it ambition. The table fell silent. Mom's eyes filled with tears. Dad's jaw tightened. I think you should leave, Grace said softly, but firmly, a gleam of victory in her eyes. So I did. I packed my bag, caught a flight back to Boston, and didn't hear a word from them until 3 months later when I saw the Facebook post, Patricia Clare's 60th birthday bash, a celebration of love and family. Not from Mom's page, she barely used social media, but from Grace's, complete with a professionally designed banner and a long guest list that included everyone except me. I found it during a late night at the office, the blue glow of the computer screen, the only light in the room. It was nearly midnight, and I was reviewing quarterly reports while the cleaning crew vacuumed around me. My assistant Claire poked her head in. Still here, she asked, concern in her voice. I forced a smile. Just finishing up some things. After she left, I stared at the Facebook event, scrolling through photos of family I hadn't seen in years, of Mom beaming in a sea of well-wishers. My name was nowhere to be found. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair, the weight of old hurt and fresh betrayal pressing down on my chest. Maybe this was who I was to them, someone who was good at being successful, but never quite enough to be family. But something inside me, that small voice that had always whispered, "You're special in your own way," Mia wouldn't let me just walk away. I pulled out my phone and dialed Mom's number, heart pounding as I waited for her to answer. When she finally did, sounding surprised and a little confused, I said the words that had been burning inside me all night. "Mom, I saw about your birthday party." Why wasn't I invited? Mom's pause on the other end of the line felt like it stretched for hours. I could hear the gentle hum of a TV in the background and the distant clink of dishes, normal sounds, that somehow made the distance between us feel even sharper. "Mia," she said finally, her voice wavering. "Of course you were invited. I thought you were too busy with work." I swallowed hard. "I saw the event on Facebook, Mom. Grace didn't include me." My voice was calm, but inside I was screaming. Mom hesitated. "Grace told me you'd already said you couldn't make it. Something about a big project in Singapore." "I never said that," I said quietly, the weight of her words pinning me to my office chair. "I would have made the time, Mom. I wanted to be there." She was silent for a moment, then sighed, sounding more tired than I'd ever heard her. "I'm sorry, honey. I guess I should have double-checked. But you know how things are. Your father and Grace have been handling most of the details." I closed my eyes, fighting back a wave of frustration. "I know," I said softly. "But this is your party, Mom. I wanted to celebrate you." She let out a small, almost guilty laugh. "You always were the one who remembered the little things, the birthdays, the anniversaries." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I've missed that." I gripped my phone tighter. "I've missed you, too." The silence that followed felt like a truce, both of us standing on the edge of something fragile and uncertain. Finally, Mom spoke again, her voice stronger. "If you can come, Mia, I want you here. I don't care what Grace said. This is my birthday, and I want all my children with me." I exhaled shakily, feeling a flicker of hope. "I'll be there," I promised. "I'll book a flight first thing tomorrow." "Good," she said, the relief in her voice softening something in my chest. "I'll make sure you're on the list. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." We said our goodbyes, and I hung up staring at my reflection in the darkened window. I could see the outline of my face, the determined set of my jaw, and for the first time in a long while, I felt something like resolve. The next morning, I woke up early, booking a first-class ticket to Chicago without a second thought. It was an indulgence I couldn't really afford, but this wasn't just any trip, it was a mission. I called my assistant Claire as soon as the sun came up. I need to take Friday off next week, I said. It's family. There was a pause. Family, she repeated, surprise clear in her voice. Are you okay? I managed a dry laugh. Let's just say I'm finally learning how to deal with them. I spent the next few days preparing, like I was going into battle. I found the perfect gift, a delicate emerald brooch from an antique shop downtown, a piece that reminded me of the stories Mom used to tell me about her grandmother's jewelry box. I paired it with a luxury spa package, because if there was ever a time to remind her she deserved to be pampered, it was now. The total cost was more than I'd spent on any single family gift in years. But as I wrapped the box in silver paper and tied it with a satin ribbon, I felt a strange sense of pride. This wasn't just about the gift, it was about showing up fully on my own terms. I spent hours in front of my closet trying on outfit after outfit until I settled on a simple but elegant navy dress that struck the perfect balance, professional, not flashy. Confident, but not showy. I wanted to remind them and myself that I wasn't the child they could dismiss anymore. The night before my flight, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, rehearsing my lines like I was preparing for the biggest presentation of my life. Hi, Mom. Happy birthday. So good to see you all. I practiced saying it with a smile that was genuine but not too eager. I told myself over and over, you're not here to impress them. You're here for Mom, for yourself. Just before I turned in for the night, I got a text from Grace. Heard you're coming. Don't make this weekend about you, Mia. I stared at her words, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. The old Mia would have tried to explain, to justify, to prove that she wasn't the selfish one. But the new Mia, she just typed back, I'm looking forward to celebrating Mom. The flight to Chicago was a blur. 3 hours of fidgeting, flipping through work documents that I couldn't focus on, and replaying every possible scenario in my head. Would Mom really stand up for me? Would Grace find a new way to twist things? Would I be able to hold my ground? I landed in Chicago on a crisp Friday afternoon. Instead of staying at my parents' house, where the memories of teenage fights and slamming doors still echoed, I checked into a hotel downtown. Neutral territory. A place to retreat if things went badly. That evening, I sat in the hotel lounge, nursing a glass of Merlot and watching the city lights flicker outside the window. I thought about how I'd spent years carving out a life I loved in Boston, surrounded by people who respected me for my mind and my ambition. But in this family, I still felt like the girl who had to prove she belonged. I thought about all the times Mom had quietly defended me when Dad's disappointment was too loud. The times she'd sat in the dark with me, just holding my hand, saying nothing, but making me feel safe. I owed it to her to try one more time, to show up, to fight for my place. The next morning, I woke up early, my heart pounding in my chest as I slipped into my navy dress. My hands shook as I fastened the tiny pearl earrings Mom had given me for my college graduation, a silent reminder of a time when I'd been certain she was proud of me. As I stepped into the lobby, I took a moment to breathe, steadying my racing pulse. This wasn't just another family gathering. It was my chance to reclaim a piece of myself I'd let them take too many times before. The venue was beautiful, a converted boathouse on Lake Michigan, all warm wood and soft lighting. It was exactly Mom's style, elegant but welcoming. My heart twisted as I stepped out of the cab and saw the familiar cars lining the lot. Uncle David's battered truck, Aunt Julia's sensible sedan, and even my cousin Ben's flashy new sports car. I gripped the gift in my hands, the weight of it grounding me as I walked toward the entrance. The moment I saw my father standing at the door checking a clipboard, like he was a bouncer at an exclusive club, I felt the old panic surge up. But I swallowed it down, straightening my shoulders and fixing a small, polite smile on my face. Hi, Dad, I said, my voice calm. I'm here to wish Mom a happy birthday. He looked up at me, his mouth a thin line. Mia, he said flatly, no warmth in his tone. What are you doing here? I kept my smile steady. I told Mom I'd be here. He looked back down at his clipboard, running a finger along the list of names. You're not on the list. He said the words deliberate, like a blow to the gut. My breath caught, but I didn't let my smile falter. There must be some mistake. I spoke to Mom. She wants me here. He didn't budge. This is a party for people who actually make time for family, he said, his voice low but carrying. Behind him, I saw Grace step into view. Her lips curved into a faint, triumphant smile. My stomach twisted, but I didn't let my face show it. I took a deep breath, every instinct telling me to turn and run. But I stayed rooted in place, my hands steady around the gift. I'm here for Mom, I said evenly. I'll wait for her. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about a birthday party. It was about finally standing up for myself, no matter how much it hurt. I stood there, the cold Chicago wind cutting through my navy dress, my father's words ringing in my ears. Not on the list. Grace watched me like a cat watching a mouse, her smile small and sharp. Behind them, laughter and music spilled out of the boathouse, a soundtrack to my quiet humiliation. Dad? I said, my voice low, even. Please. Just tell Mom I'm here. I promise I won't cause a scene. Grace's eyes gleamed with something that looked like triumph. We already discussed this, she said lightly. After Thanksgiving, Mia, you can't just show up and expect everything to be fine. I clenched my jaw, heat rising to my cheeks. I spoke to Mom. She said she wanted me here. She probably felt pressured, Grace said with a shrug, her tone syrupy sweet. You know how she hates confrontation. Dad's gaze was unwavering. Go home, Mia. This is family business. People who make the effort. The words cut deeper than I cared to admit. I opened my mouth to argue, but the sight of Aunt Julia glancing over with raised eyebrows, of Uncle David pretending not to hear, stopped me cold. I felt like a child again, caught in the middle of a family I could never seem to please. I forced a calm smile. I understand, I said quietly. My hands were trembling, but I kept my chin high. Please give this to Mom. I held out the silver-wrapped gift, the emerald brooch I'd spent days picking out. Dad took it, his expression unreadable. Tell her I love her, I said, voice clear, despite the lump in my throat. And that I hope she has a beautiful birthday. I turned and walked away, each step heavy but deliberate. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. As I reached the parking lot, I could hear the muted laughter of the party guests behind me, a world I was no longer welcome in. My rental car felt like a lifeboat as I slid inside the silence wrapping around me like a cocoon. My hands shook so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. I sat there for a long moment, staring at my reflection in the rearview mirror. My carefully done makeup, the pearl earrings, the navy dress, that had felt like armor, now they all felt like a costume. I pressed my forehead to the steering wheel, taking deep, ragged breaths. In 2, 3, 4. Out, 2, 3, 4. I wouldn't cry. I wouldn't give them that. A knock on the window made me jump, and I looked up to see a face I didn't expect, Ethan, Grace's boyfriend. Tall, dark hair, kind eyes that looked out of place in this cold, calculating family drama. He gestured for me to roll down the window. Against my better judgment, I cracked it open. Mia, he said, his voice soft. Can we talk? I stared at him, wary. What is there to talk about? He shifted, glancing back toward the boathouse. I wanted you to know. What happened back there? That wasn't right. It wasn't your fault. I laughed bitterly. I know exactly whose fault it was. Ethan hesitated. I work at Luminous Technologies. I'm in the software engineering department. I recognized you the second I saw you tonight. I blinked, confusion, warring with the mess of emotions in my chest. You're at Luminous how? How did I not know that I joined about a year ago? He said, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. Transferred from the Chicago office to be closer to Grace on weekends. Of all the companies, of all the jobs, he worked at my company. My sister's boyfriend part of my team, and I'd never even realized. Does Grace know? I asked, my voice quiet. Ethan looked away. Not exactly. She knows I work there, but not that I work for you. I let out a shaky breath. This is surreal. He nodded. It's been weird for me too, especially tonight. He paused, then met my eyes again. Mia, last night I overheard Grace and your dad talking. They were planning to turn you away if you showed up. My stomach dropped. They planned it. He nodded again, his expression apologetic. Your mom wasn't part of it. She was excited to see you. But Grace, she's been telling her you're too busy that you don't care. I closed my eyes, my heart aching. She's been saying that for years. I know, Ethan said softly. And I know how she talks about you when you're not around. She's jealous, Mia. She always has been. I let out a humorless laugh. Of what I'm the black sheep, the one who left. He shook his head. You're the one who built something for yourself. She stayed because she felt she had to. You left because you knew you could. I stared at him, the truth of his words settling in my chest like a stone. Why are you telling me this? I asked finally. Because it's wrong, he said simply. And because I respect you, Mia. At Luminous, everyone talks about how driven you are, how fair you are. You're not the villain Grace makes you out to be. I leaned back, trying to process it all. For years, I'd let their narrative shape how I saw myself. Maybe it was time to start seeing things more clearly. Ethan shifted in the cold night air. What are you going to do? I looked out at the dark lake, the city lights glittering on the water. I don't know, I said honestly. Part of me wants to get back on that plane and never look back. But he prompted gently. But part of me thinks it's time to stop letting them decide who I am. He nodded, his expression earnest. I'll support you whatever you decide. For a moment, the weight of his words and the honesty in his gaze gave me a glimmer of something I hadn't felt in years' hope. I took a deep breath. I think I need to go back in there. Ethan's eyebrows shot up. Are you sure? No, I admitted. But I'm done being the one who leaves without a fight. He gave a small, encouraging smile. Then let's do it. I opened the door, my legs trembling as I stepped out. My heels clicked on the pavement, each step measured deliberate. Ethan fell into step beside me, a quiet presence that felt like a shield. As we approached the boathouse, the laughter and music reached my ears again. But this time, it didn't feel like a wall keeping me out. It felt like a challenge. I glanced at Ethan, my heart thundering. Ready, he nodded, and together, we walked back toward the place that had tried to shut me out. This time, I wasn't just there to smile and nod. I was there to be seen. Ethan and I entered the boathouse through a side door, bypassing the clipboard and my father's cold command. The laughter and chatter felt almost jarring after the quiet of the night outside. I felt the weight of every pair of eyes as we stepped in, family, friends, cousins, neighbors, all gathered around tables, draped in white linen and flickering candles. I scanned the crowd, searching for my mother's familiar silhouette. My heart clenched when I saw her at the center table, dressed in lavender, her silver hair catching the soft light. She looked radiant and oblivious to the drama that had played out at the door. She was laughing at something Uncle David said, the easy musical laugh I remembered from childhood. Grace was the first to notice me. Her face paled, her smile freezing in place. She excused herself from her conversation and cut across the room, weaving through the guests like a shark in silk. Ethan shifted closer to me, his presence grounding me as Grace reached us. "What are you doing?" she hissed under her breath, her eyes darting nervously around the room. "I told you to leave." I stood tall, my voice low but steady. "I'm here for Mom. I told you that." Grace's lips tightened. "You're not welcome here, Mia." Before I could answer, Ethan stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "She is welcome. Mia is part of this family whether you like it or not." Grace shot him a glare, her eyes flashing. "This isn't your place, Ethan." He held her gaze unflinching. "Maybe not, but it is Mia's." Around us, conversation slowed. People were beginning to notice their curious eyes flickering between us like moths to a flame. My father approached, his face thunderous. "Mia!" I thought I made myself clear. "You're not on the list. You need to leave." "No," I said, my voice calm, even though my heart pounded in my chest. "I'm not going anywhere until I speak to Mom." Dad's jaw tightened. "You're causing a scene." I forced a small, cold smile. "No, I'm setting the record straight." My mother must have heard the raised voices, because she turned, her eyes widening in confusion as she saw me. "Mia!" she said, her voice rising above the murmurs. She stood, napkin dropping to the floor. Mia, you're here. I took a step closer, my breath catching. Happy birthday, Mom. She looked from me to Dad, her brows knitting. What's going on, Robert? Why does Mia look like she's about to be thrown out of my party? Dad opened his mouth to speak, but I didn't let him. Mom, I spoke to you on the phone. You said you wanted me here. I flew in from Boston for you. A hush fell over the room. Mom's face softened with relief, and something else, fierce protectiveness. Of course I wanted you here, honey. Why would you think otherwise? I glanced at Grace, whose smile had vanished completely. Because I wasn't on the list, I said evenly. Dad told me I wasn't welcome. Grace said I wasn't invited. Gasps rippled through the room. Mom's eyes narrowed as she turned to Dad. Robert, is that true? Dad shifted his jaw, working. I was trying to protect you from drama, Patricia. After what Mia said at Thanksgiving, what I said at Thanksgiving, I cut in. You mean when Grace accused me of having an empty life? When I finally stood up for myself, after years of being made to feel like I didn't belong, my voice carried across the room, quiet but sure. I felt the weight of decades of silence, of swallowing words that should have been spoken. I've spent years letting you all think I didn't care. But that's not true. I've always cared. I've always wanted to be part of this family. But I won't keep begging for a seat at the table anymore. Grace let out a shaky laugh. Always the victim, aren't you, Mia? You act like you're so special because you moved away and got a fancy job. This isn't about my job, I said sharply, my voice cracking like a whip. This is about the way you've twisted everything I've done. Every time I tried to reach out, you turned it into proof that I didn't care. You've been poisoning Mom and Dad against me for years, Grace. The words hung in the air, heavy and electric. Grace's face flushed red. You're paranoid. Ethan stepped in, his voice low but clear. It's not paranoia, Grace. I've heard you, at dinners and phone calls. You've made Mia out to be the villain because it makes you feel better about your own choices. Mom's eyes widened. Ethan, is this true? He nodded slowly. I didn't want to get in the middle, but I can't stand by and watch this anymore. Mom turned to Grace, her expression pained. Grace, have you really been telling me Mia doesn't care, that she doesn't love this family? Grace's lips trembled, her carefully constructed mask cracking. You don't understand, she said, her voice choked. You've always loved her more. Even when she wasn't here, even when she left, I left because I had to, I said quietly. Because staying meant letting you all define me forever. But I never stopped loving you, Mom. I never stopped hoping you'd see me for who I really am. Tears slipped down Mom's cheeks. Oh, Mia. She stepped forward, her hands reaching for mine. I see you now, and I'm so sorry for letting anyone make you feel otherwise. She turned to Dad, her voice shaking. Robert, you will not turn our daughter away again. Not today. Not ever. He looked at her, something shifting in his expression, a crack in the armor of certainty he always wore. Patricia. No, she said firmly, her voice low but resolute. This ends now. Grace's shoulders slumped, tears spilling down her cheeks. You don't understand, Mom. I've been the one here taking care of you, taking care of everything. And I'm grateful, Mom said gently. But that doesn't mean there isn't room for Mia, too. There's enough love for both of you. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Mom turned back to me, her eyes bright. Come sit with me, Mia. Come be part of this day. I felt something inside me unclench. I walked forward, my legs shaky, and took her hand. She squeezed it hard, her fingers warm and trembling. As I sat down next to her, I felt every pair of eyes on me, some shocked, some sympathetic, some quietly supportive. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Mom picked up her champagne glass and raised it, her voice ringing out clear and proud. To family, she said, her eyes locking with mine. All of us. Imperfect, but here together. Glasses clinked, and for a moment, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something new. The clinking of glasses echoed like a promise, fragile but real. As I sat beside Mom, I felt the eyes of the room flicker back to their conversations, though I knew the story of what had just happened would be whispered about all night. Mom squeezed my hand, You're here now, Mia. That's what matters. She said it quietly, her voice raw with emotion. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I'm sorry I didn't push harder to be here sooner, Mom. She shook her head. Don't you dare apologize. You've always done what you needed to do. I just wish I'd seen how hard it was for you to keep reaching out. Grace sat across the table, her eyes red, her hands twisting in her lap. She didn't say anything, and for once I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. I could see her trying to piece together a new version of herself, one that didn't rely on being the perfect daughter in my absence. Ethan lingered near the edge of the room, watching me with quiet support. He'd returned to his place beside Grace, but I could tell he was still on my side. Our brief conversation outside had changed something fundamental in me, made me realize that the narrative I'd lived with for so long wasn't the only truth. Dad sat stiffly at the end of the table, his jaw tight. He avoided my eyes, but he didn't interrupt. For now, that was enough. Mom leaned closer. Tell me about your life, Mia. Your work, your friends. I want to hear everything. I laughed softly. It's a lot, Mom. But I'll start with the most important part, how I finally learned to stop apologizing for wanting more. Her smile was small but proud. That's my girl. I started to tell her about Boston, my apartment overlooking the river, the coffee shop where the barista knew my order, before I even walked in. About Luminous, and how I'd built a team that respected me, not because of who I was related to, but because of what I brought to the table. I watched her face light up with every detail. She asked questions, real ones, and I answered them all. It felt like healing one sentence at a time. Grace stayed quiet, and though the silence between us was uncomfortable, it was honest. At one point, she looked at me, her lips parting like she wanted to say something. But the words didn't come, and I didn't push her. As dinner ended and the music swelled, Mom stood and gestured for me to join her. Let's dance, Mia, she said, her eyes bright with challenge and love. I hesitated, glancing at Dad, but he just looked away, his hands folded tightly in front of him. I stood, my heart pounding, and took Mom's hand. The band played a soft, jazzy tune, and we moved slowly the way we used to dance in the kitchen when I was a kid. You were always the one who would dance with me, she said, her voice catching. Grace? She never liked to. I smiled faintly. She's always been more comfortable being in control. True, Mom said with a small laugh. But you always had your own rhythm. The song ended, and applause scattered politely around the room. Mom hugged me tightly, her arms trembling. Thank you for coming, Mia. You don't know what it means to me. I think I do, I whispered. When I pulled back, I saw Ethan waiting, his expression thoughtful. He stepped forward, offering a small, respectful smile. May I have this dance? I hesitated, glancing at Grace, but she was turned away, deep in conversation with an aunt. Sure, I said, surprising myself. We stepped onto the dance floor, and he placed his hand lightly at my waist. You were brave tonight, he said quietly, his tone admiring. I laughed softly. Brave or just tired of being silent? Maybe both. His smile was gentle. Either way, I'm glad you didn't walk away. Me too, I said, my heart steady for the first time in a long while. He paused, his eyes searching mine. Grace, she's going to have to deal with the truth eventually. I know, I said. I don't want to hurt her. But I can't keep pretending either. That's not your job anymore. Ethan said, his voice firm. You've done more than enough. The song ended, and we stepped apart. Thank you, I said softly. He nodded. Anytime, Mia. Truly. I made my way back to Mom, who was holding court with a few family friends, sharing stories about my childhood with an ease that made my chest ache. For years, I'd let Grace's narrative define who I was in this family. Tonight, I'd taken back my own voice. As the night wound down, I helped Mom open her gifts. She held up the emerald brooch, her eyes shining with tears. How did you know? She asked. You showed me your grandmother's jewelry box once when I was little, I said, my voice catching. You said the emerald brooch was the piece you missed most. I remembered. She pressed the brooch to her chest, her eyes wet. You've always remembered the little things, Mia. That's what makes you special. Grace stood nearby, her arms folded, her expression unreadable. I met her eyes, and for a moment I saw not a rival, but a sister, flawed and human, just like me. I'm going to head out, I said to Mom after we'd cleaned up the last of the cake. I'm staying downtown tonight. Her smile faltered. You don't have to. You could stay at the house. I shook my head gently. Not tonight, Mom. I think we all need a little space to figure out what comes next. She nodded, understanding flickering in her eyes. I'm proud of you, Mia, for everything. I hugged her one last time, feeling the weight of the years between us finally begin to lift. As I stepped outside, the cold night air wrapped around me, but it felt bracing, not punishing. Ethan joined me on the steps. Where to now? He asked quietly. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Back to my hotel, back to my life. But with a little more clarity than I had this morning. He smiled. That's enough for tonight. I looked back at the boathouse one last time, the lights warm and inviting behind the glass. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was locked out. I felt like I'd stepped into something new, something honest. As I walked toward the parking lot, I realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning. The beginning of a life where I no longer had to choose between who I was and where I came from. The next morning, I woke early in my hotel room, the Chicago skyline dusted in pale dawn light. My body felt heavy, like I'd run a marathon the night before. Maybe, in a way, I had. I lay there for a moment, listening to the quiet hum of the city, and let myself feel the weight of everything I'd said, everything I'd heard. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Breakfast. Just you and me. A small smile broke across my face. I'd love that, I replied. I showered and dressed, choosing jeans and a simple sweater, something that felt like me, no more costumes, no more masks. I met her at a small cafe by the lake. She was already there, bundled in a soft scarf, her hair silver and elegant. She looked up as I approached, her face lighting up. Hi, sweetheart, she said, her voice warm. Hi, Mom, I said, hugging her tight. We sat by the window, sipping coffee, and watching the lake glitter in the morning sun. For a long moment, we didn't speak, just breathed in the peace of being together. Then, Mom reached across the table and took my hand. I'm sorry, Mia, she said softly. I'm sorry I let Grace twist things. I should have asked more questions. I should have fought harder for you. I squeezed her hand. We both should have fought harder, I said. But we're here now. She nodded, her eyes damp. I want to be part of your life, Mia. I want to know your world. My chest tightened with emotion. I want that too, Mom. We spent hours talking. I told her about Luminous, about my team, the projects that lit me up, the moments that challenged me. She listened, really listened, her eyes bright with pride and curiosity. She asked questions not out of politeness, but out of genuine interest. It felt like she was seeing me for the first time, and I realized I was seeing her too, not just as my mother, but as a woman who'd fought her own battles. When we said goodbye, she held me tight. Come home again soon, she whispered. Not just for holidays. Come when you need to, even if it's just for me. I will, I promised. And you come visit me in Boston. I want to show you my world too. As I walked back to the hotel, I felt like something had shifted inside me. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of proving myself. I was just me. Back in Boston, a few days later, life fell back into its familiar rhythm, early mornings, at the office, late nights, strategizing with my team, the quiet satisfaction of doing work I loved. But something was different now. I felt steadier, more whole. The confrontation with my family hadn't just reopened old wounds, it had helped heal them. Ethan and I saw each other at work, our interactions strictly professional. But on weekends, we'd meet for coffee, talking about family, and the messy truths we'd uncovered. He told me he and Grace were on a break, a gentle way of saying things might never be the same. I could see the sadness in his eyes, but also a sense of relief, like he was finally stepping out of a story that wasn't his to carry. One Saturday, as we sat in a cafe in Cambridge, he said, I think your mother's party was a turning point for all of us. I nodded. It was. And it's not the end. Grace and I still have so much to work through, but at least we're not pretending anymore. That's the best place to start, he said with a small smile. Mom kept her promise. A month later, she visited Boston for the first time. I took her to all the places I loved, the little bakery with the best croissants, the bookstore where I'd spent countless hours losing myself in stories. I showed her my apartment, the view of the Charles River that never failed to soothe me. She met my colleagues at Luminous, her eyes shining with pride, as she shook hands and asked questions. For the first time, I saw her see me not as her daughter, but as the woman I'd become. When she left, she hugged me tight. "You've built something beautiful here, Mia," she said, "and I'm so proud of you." "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. "I'm proud of me, too." Grace and I started talking again, slowly, carefully, like two people feeling their way back to something they'd lost. She apologized haltingly for the lies she'd told, the ways she'd twisted things to make herself feel safer. I told her I understood more than she thought. We'd both been trying to survive in the only ways we knew how. "It doesn't excuse what I did," she said one night over the phone, her voice thick. "But I want to try. I want to be your sister again, not your rival." "I want that too," I said. And I meant it. 6 months later, Mom's birthday felt like a distant memory, like the first crack of light in a dark room. We still had our issues, but we were talking, we were listening, and that felt like enough for now. That Thanksgiving, I hosted dinner in my Boston apartment. Mom and Dad flew in, and even Grace came bringing a simple apple pie she'd baked herself. We didn't pretend everything was perfect, but we didn't have to. We laughed, we shared stories, we cleaned up the dishes together. And when Mom raised her glass and said, "To family messy, flawed, and finally honest," we all clinked our glasses and meant it. Later that night, as I stood on the balcony overlooking the city, I thought about the girl I'd been, always half in the shadows, always trying to prove she was enough. I thought about the woman I was now, successful, yes, but more importantly, unafraid to claim her place in the world. I realized then that my family would never be simple, but it was mine, and I wasn't running from it anymore. As the city lights twinkled below, I took a deep breath and let the cold air fill my lungs. I was here. I was whole. And for the first time in my life, that felt like everything.